Hello, listeners. Welcome to Tenure, a game menu, where we break down how you can get tenure when you still have a life and want to stay in academia after tenure. My name is Li, a Chinese historian currently works at the University of Texas at Dallas. I was born and raised in southern China. My first book about gambling in 19th century China was published by the Harvard University Asia Center in 2023. I applied for tenure twice, once at a mid-sized teaching-focused college in Iowa, and now at a research-oriented school in Texas. I am also a hula dancer. I have 2 children, and I am a wife of an ER doctor. Today, I am joined by Dr. Mai Wang, a third-year assistant professor of literature at UT Dallas, where she teaches Asian American and Chinese diasporic literature. She is the author of the forthcoming monograph, The Asian American Renaissance: Literary Encounters Across Time. Mai is currently writing her second book, a critical biography of the Chinese writer Eileen Chang. Besides writing for the academic audience, she is also a published fiction writer. Compared to other guests we talked with so far, 2 things about Mai are unique. First, Mai's first book is forthcoming before even taking the pre-tenure sabbatical, and she also has 2 more books in publication pipeline. According to Mai, joining a writing group and approaching publishers as early as possible are keys. Second, many of us have tenure as the ultimate goal, but Mai's goal instead is to achieve financial independence, including living a modest and frugal life, self-education of financial skills such as maximizing retirement accounts and owning a rental property to offset some of the living costs. Many of us probably go into academia to indulge in reading and writing, but those are privileges without the financial supports. We got paid to do what we love is no longer enough to sustain our life. In a way, it is not tenure and the job security comes with it, but the mental comforts that provided by financial independence grants us the freedom to truly enjoy teaching, writing, and research among all the uncertainties in life. So, how to rise above and how to rethink tenure from a financial perspective? Let's listen in. Good morning, Mai. Welcome to the show.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me on the show.
Please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I am a third-year assistant professor in the literature program at UT Dallas, and this is my first tenure track job out of graduate school. I spent 1 year after my PhD. I graduated from Stanford with a PhD in English in 2021. I spent 1 year as a postdoc fellow, also at Stanford, teaching in what is now known as the College Fellows Program, which is a freshman humanities program that I believe is mandatory for all freshmen at Stanford now, that exposes them to a wide variety of thought from the Western tradition and to some extent from other, global traditions as well. And I have just passed my 3rd-year mid-probationary review, so I'm entering into my 4th year at UT Dallas, and I will be on leave in the fall working on my book project.
Fantastic. And then I also knew that you did your undergraduate at Yale, and then you also got your MFA at Boston University before you enter the PhD program.
Yes. So my husband likes to joke that I am a professional student.
You are a professional student in at school your whole life, like for sure. We all are. So this is the you just passed the 3rd-year review and then going on a research leave, and then the 4th year in the tenure track job. So since you are my colleague, and so I guess we share very similar requirements, like for tenure in UT Dallas, like as a public institution, an R1 institution. So my standard for my tenure case is 1 book, and then the book has to, in the stage, to have page proofs, so in the production period, and several articles. And we have a 2-2 teaching load. And then I believe the school requires 6 to 12 external letters, and then I got 14. How about you? Is it about the same in the program?
Yeah. I think the baseline standard is to have your book either under production, so completely approved, right, by the book series editor and the peer reviewers, or already published. A lot of you guys, I mean, you came in with your book already published. Annie published over in history, had published her book 2 years ago. Kate Davies in philosophy here at UTD also has published her first book already. Um, my colleague Ashley Barnes in Lit, I think, also published her book several years before she went up for tenure. So I think a lot of us are probably, self-admitted overachievers or something like that, or we were, working on this material for so long that it just needed to come out when it did. So I will have my first book out this fall. Which I guess technically is a little bit early, but I do want to move on to the second book project. So my personal goal for myself is to actually have the second book, the biography of Eileen Chang or Zhang Eileen, finished, not necessarily fully edited or approved, but at least finished and submitted to the publisher by the time I go up for tenure. So right now I'm aiming for a completion date for that manuscript of August 2027. So, but that's more of a personal goal, just because I've been studying her work for a long time and um, already started working on that project. So instead of focusing on producing more articles, I think I'm going to be focusing on just finishing the second book for the remainder of my 2.5 years until I go up for tenure. Yeah.
That's a lot of achievement. So for those of us who are not very familiar with the third year review, so if we think about tenure, the 6, 7 years is kind of like a marathon. For me, I took 10 years because in two different institutions. So is the third year review kind of like a midway? And then what are the requirements? Like what do you need to what is the third year review is like?
Yeah, yeah. So I appreciated going through the 30-year review because the cadences and the deadlines I think mimic um the 6-year tenure review. So here at UTD we're a little bit unusual and idiosyncratic because we require all the third year review documents to be submitted by the assistant professor by September 1st. Whereas, to my understanding, other schools actually perform the third year review in the spring semester of the candidate's third year. So we're about 6 months earlier. So at UTD, the third year review is more like a review of whatever you've managed to produce in your first 2 years, right? But the teaching observations and the actual committee recommendation are produced in the fall semester of your third year. The documents are pretty standard. I didn't find them too onerous, and I had some examples to draw from. Just a kind of summary statement of accomplishments, writing samples that you should already have, and your updated CV. So that really was not too bad. It just took me a couple of days to get together. Um, yeah, I mean, I think the number one thing for R1 jobs that really trips up assistant professors is, are you able to produce the first book in time or not, right? So if you know that you are able to, it's not scary at all. I imagine that if you don't have your book accepted under advanced contract anywhere, or if you're still working on it, maybe it's scarier to go through this process because of the much greater uncertainty.
It is really important, but I feel like producing the first book is especially hard for assistant professor. I'm not sure about you because my first job, I had a 3-3 teaching load for 7 years, and teaching takes up a lot of time and writing as well. So I remember during the first 3 years, I was not able to just touch the book at all. So how
Mm.
was the process like for you? I know you had a 1 year postdoc at Stanford, but how was the process of you to turn the dissertation into a book? And then was it a smooth process?
Uh, I think I prioritized writing the a new chapter first when I got here because I knew that one of the chapters in my dissertation needed to be excised. So I turned that chapter into a journal article and I prioritized writing the completely new material. I think one thing that helped was I got an advanced contract in my first year. So I knew that a publisher, a university press, is was going to take it, and that just gave me a lot of mental relief and a deadline that I and the publisher had mutually agreed upon. And it's also based on my dissertation, right? So it wasn't 100% a new draft manuscript that I had written from scratch and, pulled out of the ether. There was a solid foundation there. I think the things that trip people up are when they try to start a completely different project, right? That's not based on their dissertation at all, while also trying to be a great teacher and juggling family life. So, and that is, I think, the riskiest thing you can do. But that's why, generally speaking, you go on the job market with a revised version of your dissertation project, right? So there needs to be some solid material that you can expand upon. It's also, I think, very helpful that here at UTD we have, I'm currently running a junior faculty writing workshop for assistant professors and now associate professors. And I've been able to workshop works in progress almost every semester since I've been here, either the book chapter, which ended up making it into the book, or some of my fiction, or now the new project. And that has been really, really helpful because we've been giving each other, um, I think, some of the best feedback I've ever received in any academic context. Um, and perhaps equally importantly, we establish internal deadlines for each other. Right. So, yeah, without those two things, I think it would have been also more difficult without the writing group support and without having the advance contract, knowing that the publisher was going to print it.
That's amazing too for that kind of accountability, either from the publisher or from the colleagues, right? And then to have the day-to-day support and the internal deadline for the writing workshops. So for those of us who are not familiar with the publishing world, and can you explain a little bit more to us, like what is an advance contract? Now, what kind of things that, how do you approach a publisher, and what kind of things that you need to submit in order to score an advance contract?
Yeah, so the policy varies from university press to university
Who
press.
is the publisher, by the way?
Huh?
Who is the publisher that you
Oh,
chose, by the
for
way?
the first book, it's Edinburgh University Press, and for the second book, it looks like I'll be working with Bloomsbury because the second book is more for a popular audience. But the process for both of them, right? They're both peer-reviewed publishers. They're both academic publishers. In the case of Bloomsbury, they publish some biographies that could go either way, but the process is the same. You submit the proposal that has the project summary, the chapter summaries, and the sort of proposed audience for the book and comp titles, right? So you have to tell the editor and the editorial board what niche your book is filling. So in that sense, it's not unlike commercial publishing. You have to prove that there's going to be at least a hypothetical readership out there, that you're filling in a gap in some way. And then it goes out, if the editor likes the project, it goes out for peer review, and then you get comments from the peer reviewers, typically two peer reviewers, with a recommendation of whether they should publish the book or not. So then after that, you would typically submit the full manuscript, at whatever time you're already agreed to. So, yeah, it's a very involved process. I had no idea that there were so many stakeholders. The part that I left out was that after the peer reviewers recommended for publication, the university press or the publisher's editorial board has to then approve or deny the book proposal, right? To see if it can fit on their list, if they can support the project or not. So really, it's several steps. And for my first book, it's Edinburgh has a new series on 19th century American literature and culture. So the book is a part of that series, even though it's also about Asian American literature. So the book series editors also had to give their recommendation. So I think for the first book, I ended up having five people reviewing different parts of the proposal or manuscript at different times. Um, but that was helpful. I got a lot of really helpful, incredibly constructive criticism that I think a lot of first time authors probably don't get. I got a lot of detailed feedback, which was great. Yeah.
So I do have two follow-up questions. So one of them is like, how did you identify these publishers to work with? Because there were so many to choose from, like in the
Yeah.
market. Mhm.
Yeah, so I was made aware that Edinburgh typically offers advanced contracts by my colleague, Dr. Mingu, who you you probably know. He's the Chinese literature professor here at UTD. And he knew that, I think, because Dr. Erin Greer also published her first book with the same press. But really, she didn't tell me that, oh, you need to go with this publisher in particular, and neither did he. So I just sent it out to a couple of publishers, not too many. Um, some of them were enthusiastic, others were not. It took a long time to hear back from others. And this one, the editor at Edinburgh in particular, was just really fast and very responsive. Her name is Emily. And I think this might be sort of her first job as a sort of standalone editor. So she's just very enthusiastic. And yeah, I think I got lucky. It was a really good experience working with them. They're crazy fast in their response times, by the standards of the university press world. So it's really up to you though. Like, some people only want to publish with a certain press. I think at UTD and at many other public universities, the common understanding is that it has to be published by a reputable university press. And after that, it's really up to you which press would be interested in picking up the project.
So, but you did initially you did approach the editor with the book proposal
Yes, yes,
already.
yes. I
Complete
sent
book
out the
proposal.
proposal. Yeah.
So for the advance contract, you have to submit a manuscript in order to get an advance contract.
No, that's the thing. I only had to submit 2 sample chapters in order to get the advanced contract.
So
Yeah.
that's really different though, like for different press. Some of the press for the first book, they do require a complete manuscript and
Yes,
to submit
yes.
external review.
Yeah,
So
that's the most typical move. So I wanted to have the advanced contract though, knowing that this is the book that's basically either going to make or break me. So it was comforting. But yeah, it's the policy varies, right, from press to press. Yeah, with the second book, I think I'm also hoping to get an advanced contract. But the funny story there is that the editor at Bloomsbury actually reached out to me expressing interest in my work in general based on the title of a conference paper um, that I was presenting last year at the Association for Asian American Studies. So I didn't actually have to do any groundwork reaching out to her. She had just happened to browse, a bunch of the literature panels at this conference and asked me if I had anything in progress. So I worked with her to actually refine and develop this idea to write a biography of Eileen Chang, focusing on her years in the US and a lot of the um, late works that she produced that have not been the subject of a lot of critical scrutiny.
that sounds fascinating. So let me see. So for the second book, and then if it is published by more popular publisher like Bloomsbury, right? And then so are you gonna go up with 2 books, or it's kind of like the second book can possibly count for your later promotion, for example, to be promoted to full professor? Because now having 2 books to go up for tenure, like, how do you feel about that?
I think I'm hoping that the second book would count for my eventual promotion because I don't think it's going to come out in the year that it's not going to come out before my 6 year review, right? So it would come out probably a year or even a year and a half later. So that's the hope. I do think that I don't want to move so fast that the quality of the second book suffers. So I'm really just aiming to submit the draft of the second book by the time I go up for um, tenure review in the 6 year. Yeah,
You
so
just put in
Bloomsbury.
the pipelines, right?
Hmm?
Just you have a list of publication in the pipelines and waiting to be published, right?
Right, right. Yeah, exactly, exactly. Yeah. I mean, I also have a novel manuscript that I need to revisit that I really do want to publish. Even if I didn't have a job at all, I would want to publish that book, but I need to finish my academic books that actually have publishers first.
So it sounds like the key things that if you reflect on this process about writing, one is very important to approach the publisher as early as possible to have someone to work with, and then you are in the process. And the second thing is to join a writing group so you have those internal accountabilities for feedback, for deadlines, and stuff like that. But I'm just amazed. Why are you so productive? Like, what is the secret? How did you do that? And what is the day-to-day life? Like, life is not busy for you, like to have to start teaching and then to get so much done. And you have creative writing, academic writing, and one book in contract, and then another book coming out in 2027. What is the day-to-day writing? How much did you write every day? And when do you write?
So for the when I was finishing the new material for the first book, I did go through a period where I think I was really depleting myself. I would write from, from the time my daughter, who was very young back then, went to bed, around 9, sometimes until 2:30 or 3 a.m. But that was not very a very sustainable course of action for the long term. For the second book, my daughter's older now, so it's just gotten easier, and I do have my husband's support. I do a lot of writing either very early in the morning, or after dinner, right? So that actually, I think, gives enough time to just make incremental progress every day. So it's really the same strategy I used to finish the dissertation. You just have to produce something every day, right? Whether it's taking notes for a source that you just read, or pushing yourself to write, let's say, 500 words or even 250 words. If you write 250 words a day, after a month, you'll have a substantial amount of writing. And that's very, very achievable, right? So just to think of setting goals for yourself that are manageable and not too daunting, and not worrying too much about achieving perfection, which is something that I think I'm guilty of, right? I'm definitely a perfectionist. So I have to let go of some of those tendencies when I'm doing the first draft. In terms of other productivity goals, I don't actually think I'm as productive as I could be. I feel like the material that I'm working on is something that I've been holding close to me for a very long time. So I've been reading, Eileen Chang and certainly all the other authors in my first book for over a decade now. So it's just that actually taking me a very long time to be able to articulate my own ideas about them. A decade, including 6 years of PhD study and 1 year as a postdoc, and then a few years as an assistant professor. One piece of advice that I think I'd like to share is for other people who just start academic jobs, try to make sure that you're teaching material that you're also writing about, right? That's not always possible if you're teaching a large survey course, but certainly for the seminars here, it's mostly, very feasible to include books on the syllabus that you're also writing about, and that prevents you from having to um, do too many separate, isolated preps that don't feed back into the research.
That's very amazing advice just to provide you an intellectual space, like to process and think about the materials that you're working on, no matter in the classroom or in the manuscript. So speaking of personal life, and you mentioned your husband's support and also your daughter, and then it is also very important line of the tenure life as well. So now let's move on and approach tenure in a broader context. And let's talk about numbers. And this is something that we're all very interested in about, but it's also very mysterious to us because we normally don't have conversation like that. It's more a taboo. It's kind of like a taboo to ask each other about salary. But I'm very open and I'm very happy to share mine. So, Mai, can you describe your starting salary of the job?
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, it is taboo in American culture to discuss anything like this, but it's not taboo in Chinese culture. And also, in the state of Texas, we have open payrolls that are open for any member of the public to check.
Well,
So,
the numbers are 2 years behind, so we can only see the
yeah.
numbers from 2 years ago. This is what I figure out, what I realize.
Oh, okay. Well, I've actually perused that website myself. I did notice that as well. Yeah, right now we have data from 2022. So the starting salary at UTD for me was $75,000 in my first year. So this is back in the fall of 2022. But in addition to that, we have a lot of other benefits, right? So we have health insurance premiums covered for the primary subscriber, and my husband and daughter are also on the same plan. I just have to pay for them out of pocket. But we also have a research budget for the first 3 years of I think it's 3,000 per year, right? I can't remember. I think it is, and then that goes down to some other number in the subsequent years. I have to follow up about that. And I'm on the I chose to do the optional retirement plan, which is more like a self-directed 401k. So UTD actually contributes an additional, it's almost $600 a month to that. So I chose not to do the state teacher pension system for personal reasons and also just because I need to be in control.
I see.
Yeah. So overall, that's actually considered my advisor at Stanford told me that it was a very good competitive package. When he saw my offer letter, he was really, really helpful in giving me advice in my 2 years on the job market, which were very, very terrible and demoralizing years. Um, so
That's
yeah, I think
definitely competitive. But did you negotiate your salary, like
uh
the salary?
I think I tried to negotiate it up to 78, but the deans told me that everyone has to start at the same number. Otherwise, it wasn't fair to the other people starting as assistant professors. And that's fair enough. So, I think that 75 back in 2022 was actually slightly higher than the national average. I saw a lot of job ads that paid, 60, 65. I'm guessing, right? You don't see the numbers, but I'm just guessing based on Indeed and some other sources. So we're a little bit higher than the national average here for tenure track faculty. I think UTD is very good to its tenure track junior faculty, and the cost of living in Dallas is very reasonable as long as you can keep the core living expenses of housing, food, and transportation down.
Totally.
Yeah.
How about, so this is the third year. What about the annual raise? Did you get a promotional raise or annual raise every year?
As far as I know, we've only received inflation adjustments. So after 1 year, I think I went up to 80, but that was the year when we were dealing with a lot of inflationary pressures. So essentially, that was just an inflation raise. And I think this year I'm up to 82 something. So I don't know if we actually do merit-based raises apart from, ascending to associate professor and then full professor. There might be chances to earn additional income if you teach summer classes once you have tenure and or if you take on certain administrative roles. But apart from that, I think it's pretty capped here.
So, speaking of living costs, what is the living cost in the area? So we are in Dallas, and I
Yeah.
know you're at the border of between Richardson and Plano. And what is the living cost?
Well, I've designed my personal life so that my living costs are very reasonable. Um, I am currently, spending about, I would say for three people, two adults and a toddler, $1,000 a month in food, which doesn't sound reasonable, but these days it probably is, and we eat very healthy. A lot of wild seafood and produce, Asian produce in particular. And we live in a small townhouse that An has been to, so it's a three-bedroom townhouse, but our purchase price was very low. Um, uh, Figuring in the concessions and everything, the purchase price was, under $300,000. So very, very reasonable. And as a result of living in the townhouse, we've actually managed to not spend a lot on things like lawn care or insurance, right? Because the HOA covers the external insurance. And yeah, we only have one car. So I am actually very content with the way that things have turned out. But that's just because we keep everything very modest.
So I forgot to ask a question that we're all very interested in. And did you maximize your TIAA, like your contribution, like annual contribution to retirement account?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I use Fidelity. I don't use TIAA. I used a combination of Fidelity for my work accounts and Vanguard for personal stuff. So yeah, I've maximized. Well, the thing is at UTD, we actually have not one or two, but three different accounts available to us, right? So I maximized one of the accounts. I think I maximized the TS annuity account. We also have the DCP defined contribution pension account, which is also a self-directed 403B account, and I haven't opened that one yet because I'm still paying off some housing debt for this townhouse. But my plan is to right now, after this place is paid off, I'm going to maximize both of the accounts in addition to a separate Roth IRA. So
So you are loan free. I assume that you do not have any student loans.
No, yeah. I mean, I when I graduated from Yale, I actually had a very small amount of, I think $6,000 or something, but my parents just helped me out and paid it off. And that is, one of the misconceptions that people have is that Ivy League universities for undergrad are hideously expensive, but that's actually not the case if your parents earn median income, or even slightly above the median income. My dad was a software engineer for many years. We were doing just fine, but because he made below a certain threshold when during the years when I was in undergrad, um, almost everything was covered. In fact, when I moved off campus, I even got a refund from from Yale, which was great because I was able to cover part of my rent with the refund I got from the financial aid office. So yeah, BU was also covered for me because I got a merit scholarship that covered full tuition, I believe, and housing. But that was, I think, there was only one of those. So it just really depends on what you can manage to land. I don't recommend that, students who want to do something like an MFA creative writing pay tuition out of pocket or go into debt for such a degree. You really have to try to get a
Right.
scholarship. Yeah.
So speaking of parents, like, have you been getting any like financial support from your parents, like in the whole process, besides paying off the undergraduate student loan for 6,000?
Yeah, yeah. My parents were really helpful to me throughout graduate school. So I'm an only child, and Chinese culture is just radically different from American culture. So my parents have always been supportive of me in all ways, financial, emotional. Well, with the baggage of not really wanting me to study humanities for a while. My dad was a philosophy professor in China, but when he got over here to do another graduate degree, he quickly discovered that his field, which was philosophy, was just immensely difficult for someone like him. I mean, it's actually quite difficult for anyone, right? Philosophy is just it's just such a difficult profession to enter and get a tenure track job as a philosopher that he quickly realized that he wasn't gonna be able to do that, and he had to switch over to software engineering. So in a sense, I think my dad sees me as continuing or fulfilling the thing that he never got to do. But there have also been many moments when both my mom and dad were very skeptical of my life choices, right? I was in graduate school from the time I was 25 until the time I was 34. That's just a very, very long time of earning next to nothing. And I think they thought that if I had just gone to law school right after Yale, I would have been a practicing lawyer already.
So how would you describe your take-home pay then, like with your 82K salary every month?
Oh yeah, so my take home pay is a lot lower because of the maximized
Yeah,
retirement
so after, yeah,
contribution.
after all the, so what is the number of take-home pay? Mine is about 4,000 to 4,500, like
Okay,
after
so
the deductions.
yeah, because I'm paying for my family's health insurance and I'm maximizing a bunch of the one of the retirement accounts, my take home pay is only 3,200 something.
And then you mentioned that you spend about 1,000 on food, right? And
Yeah,
then
that sounds good. Yeah.
do you pay for childcare? You mentioned that you have a toddler.
Yeah, no, I we don't pay for childcare right now. My daughter's just turned 3, so if we had been paying for her childcare this whole time, I think I'd be borderline broke because childcare at a more reputable preschool or daycare is about 1,800 right now here in Richardson or Plano. There might be cheaper ones, but some of those are probably not very good. So we've managed to escape that burden. Because my husband is taking care of her when I'm not at home. That's a big trap. I think it's actually a service that should be socialized rather than privatized. But everything in the U.S. is trending in the opposite direction right now. So we would not be able to save so much for retirement. Certainly not to the extent that I'm saving. I think I'm saving over 50% of my income if we also had to pay for childcare and if we also did things that a lot of American aspirational middle class families do, like go on vacation all the time, buy new cars every for 5 years. They live in much bigger houses than is really strictly necessary and things like that. So those are really, I try to just limit consumption at this point in my life. Yeah.
One of the advice is like if you can continue to live like a graduate student after graduate school for several years, then you will be a much better standing like financially. Like the
Yeah.
advice that
Yeah.
somebody else that I heard. So do you own other assets? You mentioned that you have a townhouse, and then do you own other properties?
Yeah, yeah. So we actually own a rental property in Atlanta that we got back in 2018, and we were living in it for a while. But we got lucky with the timing of that, right? Because real estate was just much more affordable before COVID, and it's no longer the case. So that is the thing that has offset some of the cost of living right now. And aside from that, I also have like a personal interest in just finance in general and financial planning and just thinking about equity markets and different asset classes. So I read actually this guy named I think his name is Nassim Taleb. He wrote this really influential book called The Black Swan, and it came out shortly after the financial crisis in 2008. So I got a lot of really interesting ideas from him that I've been trying to apply for a number of years. His whole take is that equity markets exhibit these, sudden events that wipe out, investors who are not careful, right? So black swan events that no one can foresee. During 2008, it was the subprime mortgage crisis. Right now, it's the looming kind of onset of tariffs. So he just advocates, without going into too much detail about what he personally does, that everyone should try to set up a barbell portfolio, right? So you have your risk assets on one side and your safer or at least your non-correlated assets on the other side. So that's what I've been really trying to do in a very small, limited way, right? So I have a stock and bond, very standard index portfolio on one side that I'm contributing to for many reasons, like hopefully long-term growth, if that still continues to be possible in the future, which is kind of increasingly dubious because of, climate change and things like that. But that's the only option we have, right? And I view real estate as it's not exactly a safe asset either because of climate risk and, tenant risk, but just as a non-correlated asset.
That sounds great. So in talking about like other incomes, like do you have other incomes like during the tenure process? Because you mentioned that your spouse is a freelancer, and then you have a rental property to offset some of the living costs. And then besides your main job, and do you have other incomes during this whole like in your life?
Not at the moment. I've received some one-off honorariums from doing some guest lectures, like here in Dallas. My spouse gets paid sometimes to give guest lectures. He's a writer who's actually published two books on his experiences growing up in Afghanistan. The memoir is entitled "The Fort of Nine Towers," so he still gets speaking invitations to go to private schools or universities sometimes to give talks. But that's really it for us. So we don't have a ton coming in, but I do think that not to brag because that would be very un-Chinese, but I think I do a very fine job of managing what's coming in.
You are.
It's about managing expectations as well. I feel like the sort of secret weapon that a lot of immigrants have, even if we live, these marginalized lives, or even if we choose non-lucrative professions, is we can just be hyper frugal if we need to be. um,
For sure. So thinking about all the conversation with you, and my impression is I have two impressions. One is you are very, very productive, and then very productive and serious scholar, and already have two books in the pipelines, and the third book, like a fiction, is like in the way. So one is about publishing. You're very, very productive. Another thing is you seem to have a lot of self-education about finance. So you're really, really good at financial management. So I'm just curious about in the future, do you think you will be able to combine these two things together? Do you think there might be ways you can kind of like translate your professional skills, like capitalize them,
mm,
like making money out of it? Because now it's kind of like two separate things, right?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, I'm saving, I think just like you on for eventual financial independence because we just don't know what's going to happen in the higher education landscape, right? So it's really a personal insurance policy that I'm trying to set up for myself so that I'm not left stranded if this all dissolves, tomorrow, which there's just no guarantee because we are all subject to all of these, political and market forces that are sometimes beyond our control. Um, I do think that everyone who is employed and who doesn't have a ton of family wealth needs to educate themselves on the basics of retirement planning or even early retirement, right? So there's just a lot of great information online. Um, a lot of the education that I managed to provide myself, I've just been reading blogs for a long time. Um, so one of my favorite blogs is written by this guy who actually just retired early, and he has this blog called Early Retirement Now. So he writes in a very academic manner most of the time, but it's hyper informative and it's backed up with his deep knowledge. He has like a 56-part series of blog posts on safe withdrawal rates. So I think I read, at least 50 out of the 56 blog posts. So his whole argument is that the 4% historical safe withdrawal rate that a lot of personal finance bloggers advocate based on the Trinity study, which was done in the 1990s, is not really a fail-proof with withdrawal rate. So he advocates for something like a 3.5% safe withdrawal rate, provided that you have at least, a certain percentage of equities. I think it's something like 70% for long-term survival. So personally, I took that and went even more conservative. I'm going to aim for something like a 2.5 or even a 2% withdrawal rate, just because I think we're seeing right now that, global equity markets are becoming increasingly volatile, right? So there's like nothing you can do about it if you want to remain invested, but there's also no good alternative to remaining invested at all times. I don't believe in market timing. I don't go in and out. So I'm just strictly buy and hold. So if anyone who's interested in really delving into finance and retirement planning could start just by reading some blogs, right? So not just the guy that I mentioned now, but some more accessible, popular blogs, like Mr. Money Mustache, things like that, that are written for a more popular audience. I think would be a great place to start. Yeah.
So it sounds like as a tenure track professor, tenure has no problem for you. You don't have any concerns, but your goal is to working towards financial independence. So I'm just curious, we're close to the end of the conversation. How do you think financial independence will change the way that you work, your current job?
So the funny thing is, provided that I'm allowed to remain at UTD, it wouldn't change a thing because I actually really enjoy being a literature professor, and I view it as a privilege that I get just to read books and discuss them with students at all levels. I think it would just give me added mental security of knowing that I could withstand any sudden shocks. There are other universities where suddenly the entire department gets shut down and everyone gets laid off regardless of their tenure status, right? So we can never assume that. I think that the history of these institutions when they were first established, in the case of UTD 1970 or so, the career trajectories of the professors who entered in that first wave will not necessarily be repeated by those of us like you and me, right? Just because the country is going to head in a different direction, we should all assume that we're going to be subject to heightened scrutiny and heightened precarity at some point in our careers. I don't know when that is. It could be next semester, it could be 10 years from now. But I just don't think that we're going to be enjoying that same kind of guaranteed stability.
That's amazing. I really like the aspect of the added mental security. It's kind of like as a doctor, you actually practice for fun, and we can actually finally teach and research and write for fun. Like the
Yeah.
goal that we all enjoy when we first got into this profession. So thank you so much for sharing, Mai, and congratulations for passing the third year review again. And then wishing you a very relaxing and productive sabbatical. I know you're always going to be doing something and producing something. So before we end the conversation today, what other things would you like us to know about you?
Um, I think one of the things that I've done really well at UTD is just to try to professionalize the graduate students. So it's not necessarily anything about me, but I would just urge all of our graduate students who might be listening in on this episode to think about different possible career paths while you're still in graduate school.
Definitely thinking about other alternative like academic path, like even in graduate school, and try to
Yeah.
translate those skills that you learn and then into industry. I think it's a very, very good way to think about it. I hope you think about it even at this moment in your career. And I feel like you have a lot of skills and you have the money making mindset. So I hope one day you will combine these two, or maybe write a very popular book, or you run your whole blog, you run your
Yeah.
own podcast
Yeah.
about something like that to educate other professors. So thank you so much, Mai, for your time, and I hope to talk to you again soon.
Okay, yeah, take care on.
If you enjoyed this episode of Tenure, a Game Manual, make sure to check out our other episodes. Or if you just can't get enough of us, follow us on social media at Tenure, a Game Manual. This episode was produced by Sebastian Bancesco. Our executive producer and host is Dr. An Lee, and today's guest was Dr. Mai Wang. Sebastian Bancesco is also our editor, and we are generously sponsored by the Dean of the Bass School of Arts, Humanities, and Technology, the Provost Teaching Fellow Program, and the AXH Grant. Thanks for listening. We've now reached our special segment where we ask everyday students, what's your favorite memory or experience with one of your professors? Today we hear from Ness, a sophomore at UT Dallas.
One fond moment I have with a professor at UTD would be in my BCom 1300 class with Professor Herman. And it was really just how she made the whole class feel very welcoming, even when we're drowning in coursework like presentations and essays and mock interviews. Around the holidays or even after an exam, she'd always bring around this little basket of candy to class. It was nothing fancy, just like mini Hershey's or some Reese's. But yeah, she passed it around with a really big smile on her face. And that simple gesture really made everything feel a lot lighter on my shoulders. She also had a really warm energy, and she was like a very bright person. So even if your slides weren't perfect or you stumbled through your speech, she genuinely just wanted you to do well. Her attitude made the pressure feel way more manageable. Like, yeah, this class is tough, but you're not doing it alone. It turned what could have been just another introduction to business course into something that actually felt approachable. And honestly, she made the class feel very simple, and I ended up taking her the immediate semester after for BCom 4300 because I liked her that much.